Good morning to everyone watching us live, and good afternoon to those who will watch us later. I am Alejandro Marcano, a consultant and passionate about everything related to Power Guide. Welcome to the webinar. Today we will be addressing a fundamental topic in the world of data, especially for organizations that need to make data-driven decisions, which is data governance empowerment. And specifically, we will also present our new solution to manage these important issues. Very well. The structure we have planned for today, the dynamics of the session consists of two blocks. In the first block, I will provide some context on what data governance is and the solutions we have prepared to present to you today, which would be Power AI, Data Catalog, and a Q&A block for any questions that may arise during the session. If there is not enough time to answer all the questions, we will gladly respond to them via email, including additional information and a link for you to complete a form related to this session. Very well. When we talk about data governance and corporate information systems with Power BI, there are two topics that come to mind. First, the challenges we have to face when we make this type of deployment in Power BI, and on the other hand, we have the scenarios and conditions provided by the different options that Power BI offers for this management. We know that we do not have or encounter two identical organizations, and all scenarios revolve around many realities. But here we have a compilation of the main challenges when it comes to deploying self-service projects and data governance projects on Power BI. The first of these is how we manage the publication of content, how we ensure that our business users who only have read permissions can access the content that corresponds to them, or how self-service users can access and develop new content from certified data. How can we manage all of this? How can we make the development of global needs coexist with those of self-service that are more specific? Or how can we ensure security and access, which is such an important issue, since sometimes when we have many options within Power BI, whether it's configuring new functionalities, setting up administrative access, or configuring read access, all of this can become a topic that can get out of hand during management. Also, how can we support these advanced users who further enhance the adoption of our tools and ensure that the investment we make in reports has value, allowing us to make data-driven decisions? Okay. Also, how can we provide autonomy to these business users who are quite powerful without compromising our data governance policies? This is very important, I find it quite key, how can we monitor the use and activity that takes place on the published content? How can we measure that we have the necessary levels of adoption? How, after the investment we make in a report or in the development that leads to many reports for decision making, which involves a lot of architectural deployment, do we know that our users are getting the benefit we expect? Or how can we adjust the content to be suitable for that? Another thing is that service users often find themselves faced with models that overwhelm them because they encounter a lot of technicalities that they cannot easily translate to the functional side. So, how can we establish a direct relationship between the functional side and the technical side? How do we make that connection? Usually, in many projects, we start with the functional part, we do the technical development, and then with the evolutions, these relationships we establish become outdated over time and are discarded, becoming obsolete. We need something that allows us to manage this complicated challenge in an agile way. And to manage this, Power BI gives us many options. Sometimes they are overwhelming. For example, the tenant. Sometimes we configure functionalities within the tenant. Other times, we configure administrative permissions within the workspaces or within the assets themselves that are inside the workspaces. How can we manage this? How can we publish content in the work areas? Because many times the work areas can be a bit rigid for content distribution, depending on how we have structured the organization. The Power BI portal is quite limited in terms of customizations. The management of security in Power BI, we know, is not centralized. We have to go to different places to configure it because it operates at different levels, and this can perhaps slow down the deployment process because it is not clear what configurations we need to implement for our different audiences. 2001 also considers the security of Power BI in the work areas or by report. How do we make this distribution? Do we do it via report? Do we do it via app? Via work area? What are the scenarios that fit with each of these so that our audiences can get the best benefit according to the content that corresponds to them? We do not access information about the model. If we go to the Power BI service, we do not have information about what the metrics and tables are within our models, which somewhat limits the technical documentation. Okay, we would have to go one by one through each of our local datasets to check what is inside. There is no intersection. This is a more than clear need. As there is no intersection between the existing assets, such as datasets and reports, and the businesses that we cannot filter, especially in organizations that have many departments, many datasets, and a lot of generated content. We have no way to segment, whether by business unit, by department, or by the different granularities that correspond to this axis, our assets. So, what is Bismart's proposal to address all these challenges and scenarios of PowerBird? We have developed a value proposal where we are quite clear about the valuation, definition of configuration policy, publication, and content security in Power BI. We have a wide range of services, whether ad hoc training, gamified sessions, webinars, like this, support service, technical support, for user training and adoption of Power BI. Also, as I mentioned, one of the handicaps that exist is that since security is not centralized, in the Power BI service, it can be a bit complicated to grant and distribute the content. For that, we have a solution specially designed for this called security management, which consists of centralizing security at the content and data level in one place. We also have the Power Analytics solution, and it is one of my favorite solutions. It is very powerful, because Heaven is an analysis that allows us to monitor activity. That is to say, we can measure something that is the adoption or activity levels of the things we have within our tenant related to Power BI. It also allows us to monitor the evolution of the different assets we have. That is, what reports we have, the datasets we have, whether they are certified, and how the activity levels of these reports we are deploying grow over time. This is a software as a service, and we have it integrated directly into Azure. And something very important is that we do not need, that is, our information does not expire every 30 days. We are going to store all this information without time limits, without capacity limits, and it allows us to make evolutions and comparisons month by month, year by year, from the installation of our solution. We also have a very interesting solution for content distribution and environment customization called Power BI Bio. This allows us to create a personalized environment that enables unlimited visualization of different reports with users who do not have a license through the VP. This is done through an embed license. Additionally, it reinforces the security of business reports because it has an access granting system. So this promotes security, allows us to distribute content to business users appropriately, and enables us to manage different permissions agilely, as well as classify the different assets we have in the organization by theme. Now, how can we participate in this infrastructure that is data governance? What is the ecosystem we have developed? We focus on 5 main roles. The first would be the security administrators, for which we have our security management solution. We also have focused on the role of corporate viewers or more corporate reading users for content consumption, with the Power UI viewer. Monitoring and checking. The adoption of different content promotes activity and managers, smooths the activity of content administrators. And now with our new addition, which would be the Power BI data catalog, we can manage documentation in a quite agile manner, benefiting both the model authors. In Power BI and the users, the power users, the key users who develop Excel service, because they have appropriate documentation for what they want to achieve based on what they have. So, with the data catalog, what can we find? We are going to document all the content of the datasets automatically. That is to say, we will be able to see and quantify what metrics we have, the number of tables, the number of columns, the type of data, going towards the more technical aspects. Also, on the functional side, we can verify what the functional descriptions are that we can use and that are often not taken into account regarding the metadata of the models. That is to say, that we can identify for the business what a table means, what a calculation means for the many scenarios that may arise, and that our self-service users are not overwhelmed by a model that has 300 metrics, of which 100 do not even participate directly in the report. To quickly identify the calculations that are performed in the dataset and at a technical level, verify the nomenclature and the functional information. The nomenclature is quite important, especially when it is already developed at the organizational level, but there is consistency throughout these developments. Also, review the origins of each table, ensuring that we are using the appropriate sources, the certified sources, for report development. And something that seems key to me, because if we could access all of this, it was in a quite rudimentary way. Going model by model, as I mentioned, going to Power BI, what metrics are there? We find that it is quite tedious, a rather slow process to implement the descriptions, having all the datasets in one place. That is, we can group them thematically or desire a specific dataset and find a catalog with all the documentation of these datasets at a technical and functional level. So, what are the most notable advantages within this solution? It would be to include these functional descriptions for tables, for columns or measures, to do it in an agile manner, incorporating them one by one as needed. We are going to do something quite interesting, and we will show it to you in a demonstration that we will do shortly. Monitor the best modeling practices. It can be both verifying that the IDEs within a FAQ, for example, are hidden from self-service users and are not segmenting by incorrect dimensions, as well as hiding those measures that are for formats that may confuse our business user, and also inventory all the elements that may be in the model and promote or highlight those that will be used in self-service. Let's remember that part of our data governance structure focuses on enabling key users to develop new content based on already certified data models. Very well, now we're going to do a demonstration of how the tool works, what the tool is, so you can have a look. And here we can, as I mentioned, perhaps segment by business unit or by department. I don't know if it's still there. Okay. Well, as I mentioned, we can segment or group our assets, our data sets in particular, by the different themes that may arise in our organization. For example, by departments or by business units. I have here a slicer that allows me to navigate between one business unit and another and see which assets are present in each of them. For example, if I go here to Bismart, I find all these themes. I can segment here by sales development, by operations, and see what is within each of these segments. Going into detail, we will see which tables are present. The total number of tables at the operations level. We can choose a specific data set, for example, and see everything that is inside here. Here we can see which data set it belongs to, the type of connection of this data set. In this case, it is an import type data set, meaning everything is physically stored in this data set. The origin of the table. There are tables that come from the origin and the connection, while there are others that we develop in the analytical model that have been calculated in DAX. Here we can see what the expression would be if we, 2009, are going to obtain an expression in M or in SQL, or we are going to have a DAT expression. We can also segment by developers. Here I could search for which ones they are. In this case, I am the developer of this model. We managed to find out who the key developers are for the verification of our assets. Of all our information, we can look for those who do not have any functional description. So we only keep the tables that do not have a functional description, and later we will see why, because we can export this data and then quickly incorporate all these descriptions. That is to say, obviously we will manually incorporate the necessary descriptions. The recommendation is that we do not have to identify absolutely everything that is in a model, but rather the key things. I mentioned highlighting which are the things that will be used in self-service and that are worth documenting correctly. We can also go to the column level, which are the calculated columns, which are the designed columns, and by origin. The calculated columns already give you an indication that if there are too many, you should verify which ones are correct. Good practices regarding tabular modeling. We need to reduce the number of calculated elements as much as possible, since one of the recommendations varied according to scenarios, but they are like general rules that always arise. In the case of the calculated ones, we can see what their expression would be. That is quite interesting to review. And finally, something quite powerful, which is the metrics. What are the metrics we have within the model? Or what are all the metrics we have in all models? Whether by departments, by business unit, or by data set. And why is this? Because let's suppose we have a sales metric that is calculated in the same way across different data sets. So we can effectively search here in this bar. This bar is present in each of the reports for their respective theme, whether column, table, or measure, looking for those that have the word right in their name. Then all the measures will appear to me, that have this keyword, within their structure, or within their name. We can see if the nomenclature is correct, in which datasets it is present, and above all, ensure that it is calculated in the same way, that we are consistent. This allows us to align our efforts quite a bit, to always have the same version of our data and the information we present. All right, returning here to our sales model dataset, I would like to highlight which measures do not have a description, as we have quite a few measures that do not have a description. Only 2 of them are informed. And we can also segment those that are hidden. We usually hide measures that will not add any value to business users, which are for auxiliary use for developers. So we can hide these, okay? And we can continue in this report. We can also say which ones lack a description so that we can incorporate it, if necessary, which metrics we want to reinforce their use, which we want to promote their adoption. And for that, we have this table that we are going to exploit. We will only keep those that do not have a description, and the export in this case will give us something like this. We have the table, the measure, and what the expression is. We can include this in a template that we have developed to provide the descriptions. If we go here to our template, I have already included a few descriptions for these measures that lack a description, and it was developed automatically. I did not do this manually. A code that will allow us to inject all this functional information into the data set, and later, when a reload is done, the functional descriptions will appear in our data catalog, along with the calculated technical descriptions. So we check our Power BI model here. We see this measure in particular, this one that says xCalculate. In the description, we have absolutely nothing. This means that if I were to connect this model to our tool to include the descriptions, we would see what the change would be. Here we see the xCalculate, and I have provided a small description called example of calculate for. training. I copy this, and I am going to implement it with a tool that many of you may already know. And for those who don't, I present it to you. It's called Tabular Editor. This is a corporate BI tool that allows us better control of tabular models. In this case, we can connect it to our local Power BI. There are different ways. I will show you this alternative, which is through the local connection, and in the Shanzi script, we will include this code that we have generated automatically. I have not coded this manually at any point, and we execute it. Now, if we revisit the model, we need to refresh. Sorry, I save while visiting the model. Now that I have automatically injected a description for these measures very quickly, here I have a calculate example for training, which just a few seconds ago was completely empty. And not only this one, but the long list of measures we had seen. So, we have a lot of potential here regarding documentation. The entire technical part is done automatically, and we can include all these functional descriptions quite efficiently. To make a correlation with the business that allows enhancing the adoption of Power BI, this is very important because often we focus our efforts in the wrong directions, and users do not feel committed to using the tool, which often involves a lot of work in development. I don't know if there are any questions. We can start answering. Alejandro, thank you. Yes, we have a couple of questions. The first one would be, is there an alternative to add descriptions of fields and measures to online datasets? Okay, and the answer is yes. There are different alternatives for how we can include these descriptions. I wanted to go for the offline option because it seemed like the safest at this moment, but when we have Power BI Premium, we have access to an endpoint connection, and from there we could connect easily. The tabular editor that I presented, just as I connected it to the local model, you could do it directly to the dataset that is in the service and include the descriptions there. It would be a quite clean option, but it requires premium licensing either by capacity or by premium per user. Perfect, thank you very much. Does the next question from Alberto ask if this tool allows us to list all the reports that use a specific physical table from a database? This tool allows us to list all the tables that are within a dataset, such as if you are referring to a database or a dataset, yes, we will have the entire list of elements, tables, columns, and measures, whether they are hidden or not. We will see them. But if you are referring to a database in SQL or Azure, we will not necessarily see all the content. It has to be strictly what is loaded into the dataset or what is connected to the dataset. Okay, thank you very much. Another question, can we see the security roles of the dataset and its members? This is a good question, and we can also see the security roles. We can see the members, but it also requires a premium license. That is to say, in the deployment or in the standard installation, we would not have it present, but there is an adaptation for terms with premium capabilities that allows the visualization of roles and the visualization of the members that participate. Even what elements filter, what are the expressions that filter access to the different levels in the data, like RLS. We have this, but only for installations with premium capabilities. Perfect. And Jordi asks us how Power BI Data Catalog shows the metadata of the composite datasets that connect to other datasets. Okay. In particular with the composites, the information will look exactly the same. We will see a list of all the tables that participate, and it will tell us what the data type is. It will tell us what the measures that are present are. We can obtain this. Where there is currently no infrastructure support from Microsoft, it is for live connections, for analysis services, whether on-premise or in Azure. We will have a list of which datasets have this type of connection, but we will not be able to access the schema. So this is mainly focused, well, for now. In the future, surely, like in all the releases that Microsoft and Power BI frequently make, we will have it in the future. But for the moment, it will focus on those that are either direct query, composite, or import. Those where Power BI has direct access to the schema and there is no reference left, whether on-premise or in Azure Analysis Service. Very well, I think we have no more questions, Alejandro, so thank you very much. Thank you all for attending, I hope. You can take a look and please remember to fill out the form that will be sent. Thank you.